All right, let's move on, and we're going to work on chapter 2. Selecting artwork. So in this case, they will have drawn out everything for us. We're going to assemble a poster, but we're going to learn how to select pieces and modify pieces and move them around, which is really like step 1 that you need to know. Step 2 is how to actually make them, but today we're going to start with just how do we move things around. The basics of selecting things, reshaping them, and aligning them are really important. So we are going to do an open file, and we're going to do that lesson folder that we're in. We're going to need to back up one. So where you see lesson 1 up here, just click on that and you'll get a drop down and you'll kind of see a stack of where it's located. So you can back up to the overall lesson folder, and from there you can grab lesson 2, and we're going to use the start file. Okay, so lesson 2 start is what I want you to open. How many artboards does this have? 2, right? We see both of them. If we want to see them a little bit bigger but make them both fit, we're going to fit all of the artboard in our window. It's Command Option 0. That's going to make them bigger but show both. All right, first thing we're going to do is save this with a name specific to us rather than this goofy name that it has. So we're going to do File, Save As, and in the pop-up window we're going to see that it's going to still be located in the Lesson 2 folder, which is great, that's where we want it. But we're going to rename this with your name and then Zoo Poster. So I'm going to write Brenda Zoo Poster. In the Lesson 2 folder, and it's being saved as an Illustrator file.ai, and we're going to say Save. And then you're going to get the second window. Basically, we're always going to say OK and move on, but I want you to know about what this actually says in case you ever need it. What version do you want to save it as? Let's click on this drop down. Let's say people at your work only have CS5. Guess what? You need to save it backwards so it's compatible so that they can open it. If they have CS5 and you send them this new shiny 2019 file, they can't open it. So if you ever need to save backwards because your client has an old version or something like that, this is where you accomplish that. So we're going to keep it where it is at Illustrator CC. All of the rest of this we're going to leave alone. In the options, it says create a PDF compatible file. The cool thing about this is when you create a PDF file and you send this to somebody who doesn't have Illustrator, it opens up as a PDF. They can see it. It's all there. But if they do have Illustrator, it functions as an Illustrator file. They can edit it. They can open it in Illustrator. It works completely in Illustrator as well. So it's a cool version. All these other things that are checked, perfect. Save each artboard to a separate file. Probably not, or you would have set them up separately, but maybe there's a time that you want that. Here's where you could do it. So normally when this pops up, we're just going to quickly say OK because everything's good. So we're fine and we can move on. All right. First thing we're going to learn about is how we select objects. And I showed you those 2 tools, the selection tool, the black arrow, and the direct selection tool, the white arrow that are grayed in. We're going to use that selection tool, the top one first, and learn how that works. We want to go to our second artboard, so we can go down to the lower left window, down here where we have the percentages and then our artboard showing. Click on the down arrow, choose window 2, which is called Pieces, and that's probably going to make it bigger on your screen. And if it didn't, we're going to fit it to the window, Command 0. If it didn't do that for you already, so make sure you're on artboard 2 and it's fitting in the window. All right, with our selection tool, we're going to hover over these tan pieces, but we're not going to click yet. When we do that, if we're out in the white space, we see just a black arrow, but the minute we get inside of a shape, do you see how we have a little black square light up next to our arrow? That indicates that there's some artwork underneath our cursor right now that could be selected. We're going to zoom in on our beige circles. So you can take your zoom tool if you want, or you can Command plus a few times to zoom in. If you're doing Command plus and it kind of moves away from you too far like this, Remember, if you hold down the space bar, you'll get the hand tool, and then you can kind of drag it back into view. So get it so that you can see both of these two beige circles, and make sure that you're back to being on your selection tool, the black arrow. Move in now with this, don't click, but move in closer to the black stroke or that outline. And when you're hovering over that, do you guys see the word path show up? Small, but it's there. All right, that's telling you you're going to see things like path and anchor depending on where you click. The anchors are the dots where the dot to dots are, and the path is how they're connected. So if you're trying to find something, the more you zoom in, the easier it is to see the details. All right. Let's click anywhere inside the circle on the left, and we're going to select it. When you select something, a bounding box shows up around it. It's a square that has corners at the left, right, top, and bottom, and in the center, and you can use those to resize it and to move it. The reason that it has a blue bounding box around it, trivia question, anybody know why it's blue? Okay. Go into your layers panel, and if your layer is layer 1 and it's not expanded, it's going to look like this. If that arrow right here is clicked out and it's expanded, these are all the different shapes that we see here. The reason that it's blue is because layer 1 over here has a blue, or right here actually, has a blue line next to it. If we were to make layer 2, it would assign it randomly another color, say yellow. So when you click on something on layer 2, it's going to have a yellow bounding box telling you it's on layer 2. Helps you visually figure out where stuff is. Like I click on it on here, but I have no idea in my layers where it lives. That's going to help you realize, oh, it's yellow, it's on layer 2 somewhere. That's why that is. Okay, let's say we want to select both this one and the one on the right. Guess what? If we click the one on the right, only one selection at a time. That one's now selected, but the first one isn't. So to select two things, there's a couple of ways of doing it. Holding down the Shift key is going to add to your selection. So if I have one selected, I hold down Shift, I click on the other, it now selects them both, and the bounding box is really big around both of them. All right, if we wanted to move them, we could then click and drag, and notice that because they're grouped together like this, selected, they're moving together, keeping their distance. All right, if we want to go back to where we were, because we haven't saved this file, say we did 15 steps and we don't like it, there's an option called reverting to the last saved version of it. So we're going to do that. Under the word File, we are going to choose Revert. The keyboard shortcut for that is Option Command Z. Command Z is undo one step. This goes back to the last saved change. And it says, do you want to revert to the saved version? You're going to lose all your current changes? Yeah, I do. Revert. And there we are. It's back to where we started. So that is our selection tool. By clicking on that, we select whole shapes and we move whole shapes. We're going to switch to the direct selection tool. That tool is the white one right underneath it, direct selection tool. Before we move on, we're going to make sure that we're on Artboard 2. So check down at the bottom, choose Artboard 2. Make sure that's the active one and fit it in the window if it didn't already. So the direct selection tool, the one we're using now, actually instead of selecting the whole thing, it selects those anchor points, those dot-to-dot points, and allows us to change those, which ultimately changes the shape by moving just one anchor point, one dot-to-dot point. So with our direct selection tool, the second arrow down, we're going to click inside one of these larger bamboo shapes. Doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to zoom in so it's easier to see on my screen. So I selected it, and do you guys see how there's a blue outline around it, but there's also dots in the corners, and maybe you need to zoom in to see that. We'll learn how those work, how they change the corner in the future. But right now we've selected this shape. Notice there's not a big bounding box around the whole thing because we're actually going to not zoom in, we're going to specifically pick just 1 or 2 anchor points, not the whole shape itself. Hover over this top left corner, and when you hover, the word anchor shows up when you're hovering over the actual anchor. Again, you might need to zoom in to make this easier because it might be hard when you're out a long ways. And if we move between the 2 anchors, I see path. So I have, you guys seen that nail art where they hammer in nails and then connect it with string and make really cool stuff? The anchors are the nails and the path is the string between them. That's how this is working. All right. Also notice that your cursor changes when you're out in a zone where there's nothing. It's just the white arrow. But the minute you hover over the anchor, there's now a square at the bottom of it. And that's indicating that you are that you're positioned over an anchor point. All right, we're going to click on that one anchor point, that top left one, and we're going to select it. And it's kind of hard to see depending on how big your screen is, but do you see how that square is now filled in with blue and the others are all white? You guys see that? This one is filled in with blue, these are white. That means that that one is the one that's selected. The other ones aren't. We can now click on that and drag, and it changes our shape. So because that one anchor point is selected, I can drag it around and my dot to dots change, and the 2 lines that are connecting it change also. You have to be in the direct selection tool for this to work. The selection tool gives you the whole shape. The direct selection tool allows you to pick 1 or multiple anchor points. Okay? So I've dragged around with that and I've made a mess of it, but that's how I do that. If I wanted to change this anchor point, I would pick this one and then I would drag this one. Now I have a wholly different shape. Okay? Whatever stretching and dragging and goofiness you've done, we're going to do that revert thing again so that we get back to how the file was. So File, Revert, or Alt-Command-Z, and bring it back to how it was when we started. Okay, so using those 2 tools is how you select the whole shape or just a specific anchor point to tweak it. Another way to select shapes or things on your artboard is to marquee them, which is basically dragging your selection tool over them to select them that way. We're going to again zoom onto those beige circles on Artboard 2. So however you want to do that, make sure that you're on Artboard 2 actively. Zoom in on your beige circles. Yep.
When I click on that bamboo, I also get 4 other icons that show up in the corners.
Yes, we'll learn about those as we go. Those are the way you shape the corners. So right now they're hard corners, but we can make them round and other things. So the more zoomed in you are, the more you can see those dots that do that. If you're zoomed out, you might not even see them. Yep. All right, so the last time we selected these 2 circles, we clicked on one and then we held shift and we clicked the other one. We can do that also, but we can also do it with a marquee. So with that same selection tool, which is the black arrow, instead of clicking on one, I'm going to click slightly above it, and I'm going to hold down my mouse and drag. So watch how this is making what we call a marquee. And as long as I have a piece of either one of them in my marquee zone, when I let go, it's going to select both. You don't have to encompass the whole thing, which is kind of convenient. Because sometimes maybe there's words down here and you don't want the words, you don't want to highlight it all. So as long as you have a piece of it in this marquee, it's going to select them. So go ahead and make a marquee selection. Using your selection tool, click and drag, and then when you let go, it's going to select both of those. To deselect, click away, someplace where there's no artwork. If your artboard is filled with just tons and tons of things and you can't click away, the way to deselect, if there's no blank space to choose, is up in your select menu, you have deselect. Shortcut for that is Shift-Command-A. So if you wanted to or had to, you could go that route as well. As long as there's an area to click that's empty, you're good. You can get away from it. All right, let's switch to our direct selection tool, which is the white arrow. And let's make a marquee over just the tops of these circles. So as we do that, it's going to select both of them. But do you notice that the only anchor points or nails that are filled in with blue are these top parts, right? The top one or the one on the left, and the top one on the one on the right, until I touch the screen. So because I only highlighted this top part, it selected this anchor point and this one. They're filled in with blue, the rest are not. Now they're going to work in tandem. If I select this point and click and drag, it's making the other piece do the exact same thing, because they're both selected at the same time. So if that was my goal, to make them both be the same shape that's different, this is how I do it. Do you notice also how we went from having a perfect circle to making an egg shape? Rather than drawing it as an egg to start, easier way is make a circle, grab that one point, pull it up. You always look for the easiest way of doing things, trust me. All right, Command Z, undo. Do it a few times to back up through your steps until you're back to normal circles. Command Z, or you can do a file revert to get it all the way back to the beginning. All right, so that's selecting with clicking and selecting with marquees, two ways of doing that. From our artboard, so at the bottom left, let's go to artboard 1, which is called Final Artwork. So it's this first page in our artwork. And do a fit in the window. So Command 0. Take your selection tool, the black arrow at the very top, and move our cursor over this blue-greenish background area that we have. And then click and drag. And notice what we're doing is we maybe thought we were moving all of it, but we're actually just moving this blue background area, and we didn't want to do that. So undo is Command Z. So that blue-green shape, perhaps we don't want to move ever. We want to lock it in place, but maybe move the fox head or the words around and not worry about the background shape possibly moving with us. So there's a way to lock and to hide elements. So select, make sure that you have clicked on this blue rectangle in the background. Make sure that you can see the blue box around it showing that it's selected. And from here, we're going to go up to our object menu and we're going to choose Lock Selection. There's a keyboard shortcut for it. If you end up using it a lot, it's worth knowing. It's Command 2. I don't use that one a lot. I'm going to really hammer home the ones I want you to know. So lock our selection. All right, now when we look at it, nothing appears to have changed, but when we take our move tool, or our selection tool, we can't even select that anymore, right? Are you trying to get it and it won't work? But we can select the fox head or the letters zoo or whatever. But we can no longer select that background piece because we locked the selection. All right, so with our selection tool, we're going to marquee select the fox head. So I'm going to start outside of the fox head, I'm going to click and drag, and that's going to select everything under my cursor. Had we not first locked the blue background, it would have selected that too, because we started in the blue background. Because it's locked, we only got the fox. All right, so right now, all of these pieces are selected. Can you guys tell me, when we were talking about our how do we make things with construction paper, what's the biggest shape and what color is it here? If this were construction paper, what color is the biggest piece? Orange, right? And it's the ears all the way down to the face. It's the whole big thing. Then on top of it, there's two pieces of dark orange. Where are they? The ears, right? The white behind his ears, the hair, where is that stacked? Behind the head, right? Behind the orange? Because you can tell that that's on top of it. Do you see the outline of all the shapes? How they're bigger pieces, but they're stacked underneath? They didn't just make a teeny tiny piece and push it up tight to the head and hope it worked. They made a bigger piece and put it underneath. These white shapes are on top of it, and this one sticks out beyond the orange shape. So again, we right now have all of them selected. What if we didn't want the two black eyeballs selected? We want to remove them from our current selection. That's what we're going to do next. So we're going to hold down the Shift key, and we're going to click on this shape of the eye, and we're going to click inside the shape of the other eye. Notice how they're no longer outlined in blue. They've been removed from our selection. Okay? Now, if we want to take this whole thing of the fox and hide it, we're going to do that same thing. Object, hide selection. Everything we had selected gets hidden. The two eyeballs that we removed from it are still visible. So there they are. Okay. All right. Let's do, because we've made changes but we haven't saved the document, there's going to be an asterisk behind the file name up here. Whenever you see that, it means that something has changed that you haven't saved yet. So at this point, we're just going to do a save. So you can do a file save, and the shortcut is Command S. While we're talking about that, let's do something that's going to save us a lot of tears. The apple at the top left is where preferences are located on a Mac. On a PC, if you're doing this, you're going to find the preferences under the word Illustrator. But on a Mac, no, I'm lying. They're under preferences here. On a PC, they're under File. You have to go File Preferences to get to it. On a Mac, you go under the word, the name of the program, and you choose Preferences. Inside of our preferences, this is what sets up how Illustrator works. Why didn't that work? Preferences. So we have general preferences, anchors, displays, all this different stuff. Let's choose let's just choose general so that it pops up, and then we see all of our options anyway. So these are the preferences of how Illustrator is going to work every single time you open it. So show the tooltips, explain, give us that little cheat sheet. Double click to isolate. All these are the normal way of doing things. On the anchor display, let's go to that second one. Right now they're small, but if we wanted to make them bigger, we could pull them over here to the max. And now when we see those boxes that were really teeny tiny, they're going to be a lot bigger. So go ahead and do that. Type units. Units, how we measure things in Illustrator. Right now it's using it with points, which is something you maybe have never heard of. Maybe we want to change this to inches. We want to measure our general measurements in inches, but strokes and type, okay, they can be points too, that's fine. However you want to change this, you can. I'll go back to points. Well, let's do inches on this first one, on the general. The guides and the grid, what color they are and how they show up. Slices, hyphenation. Your actual user interface. So how dark is your background workspace? This dark gray, that's the one that I have, but if you want it lighter or white or black, you can do that. The reason we do design on gray backgrounds is because gray is a neutral color that doesn't skew our perception of other colors. If it's on a white background, sometimes it looks too bright and we dim it down. If it's on a black background, sometimes we get misled. If it's a color, you don't want that color contamination. So that's why we use these neutral gray backgrounds in design. If you end up ever working in a true design setup, working with color critical things, you will be working in a room that's painted with gray walls. You won't have windows. There's not going to be reflection bouncing off of things. It's going to be a very controlled atmosphere. So if you wanted to change it, you could do that. Performance. Hopefully this is where it shows up. Okay, file handling and clipboard. This is where it is. Data recovery. Automatically save recovery data every 2 minutes. This will save you from crashes, power outages, and other nightmares where sometimes we just get in the flow and we're designing and having fun and 45 minutes passes and we haven't hit save and something bad happens and you've lost 45 minutes of work. It happens a lot. This auto save, auto recovery is awesome. You can afford to lose 2 minutes of work. You can't afford to lose 45 minutes of work. Is this where we all are by default? Is at the 2 minute stage? Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay. Very good. That's important. All right. So say okay to that, and anything that we changed will now hopefully have changed without us relaunching Illustrator again. All right. Selecting similar objects. there is a way in here that you can select everything in your artboard or multiple artboards based on certain criteria. So say you wanted to select everything that was filled with this color green. Right now we have 4 pieces of bamboo. Say you had 700 of them. Do you want to shift click 700 times? No, you don't want to do that. So what you want to do then is this easy cheat thing. Hey, go find me everything that has this same fill color or that has this stroke end fill, something more specific. So we're going to learn that. We're going to do a fit all in window, Command Option 0. And with our selection tool, we're going to click on this bamboo piece over here. If you made your cursor or your anchor points bigger like I did in preferences, you see how much bigger they are now? How easy they are to see? They're ginormous. They're almost annoying now. I might have done it too far. Okay, so we have selected the one bamboo shape. Now what we want to do is go under the Select menu, and we're going to choose Select, Same, and specifically Stroke Color, because do you guys notice how there's a darker green outline on these? And that's unique to these. So same stroke color, and it says, okay, here's all these pieces that have that same stroke color. It's selected all of them, and the bounding box is around all of them now. That was a lot easier than shift clicking all of those. Another cool thing that you can do is, let's say that you know you're going to be coming back to this a lot and you don't want to necessarily group them and you don't want to have to reselect them every time. We can save these as a selection with a name that we give it, and then with 1 or 2 clicks pull it up anytime we want. So we're going to do that. We're going to do Select, Save Selection, and then we're going to give it a name. What do you want to call this? We're going to call it Bamboo. And then say OK. Click away, deselect them by clicking anywhere in an empty spot. Now if we wanted to recall that and get it all to pop up again, if we went to our Select menu, notice at the very bottom of it is any custom selection or save selection we've made. There's Bamboo. If we click on that, it automatically puts the bounding box around it all and we're ready to go. All right. All right, we're going to look at how you can select things in outline mode because sometimes it's hard to see what's going on. So if we were to get this file from somebody else and we'd open it up and we wouldn't really study it hard, what on earth do we think this front page is about? What's with those 2 black dots, right? There is other artwork there. It's just currently locked or hidden from us, but guess what? That outline mode still exists. We could see that if we go into outline mode, so we can see all of the artwork. So we're going to do, first of all, an object, show all, and that's going to bring it all back so we can see it the way it was meant to be, for one thing. And then we're going to click away to deselect, and then we're going to look at that outline view. And the shortcut I told you was Command Y. Here's the outlines of all these different shapes that are on our board right now. So with our selection tool, the black arrow, we're going to click within one of these eye shapes. Don't necessarily click on the X in the middle, just click on the inside of it, and guess what? You can't, right? You guys, nothing's working, correct? When you're in outline mode, all that exists are the outlines. So to select it, you actually have to be hovering over the outline itself to select it. So click on the outline, and now you select the eye. Another way of doing that, deselect, click away if you haven't, is to do that marquee thing. But remember, we don't want to accidentally grab this cheek piece or something else. So I'm going to make a marquee. Let me zoom in. I'm going to make a marquee just over the top of these eyes with my selection tool so that I grab them, but nothing else. And then when I let go, it's going to show that those 2 eyes are selected. And then if I want to move them up a little bit, but I don't want to necessarily accidentally go left or right, there's a lot of ways to control how you do that. But if it's just nudging in baby steps, use the arrows on your keyboard. Do you have them? Please tell me you have arrows. Okay. So let's arrow up like 3 or 4 times, and it moves the eyes up a little bit. So that's a good way to nudge things. All right. Go back to our normal view mode, which is Command Y. And let's just click away so that nothing is selected. All right, the next thing we're going to look at is how we align things. Let's go to your select menu in the menu option and choose that bamboo selection that we made before. And zoom out. I was going to say this is not working. I need to zoom out a little so I can see it, but notice how it selected all of our bamboo objects. So what if we wanted to align them so that they're all in a straight line? Are we going to do it by hand, by vision? Are we going to guess? Are we going to make a bunch of guides and pull them out? Or is there an easier way? There's an easier way. Illustrator can do it all for us using the align options. So there's 3 different ways of aligning objects. You can align them to each other. You can align them to one object called the key object. So let's say all of these bamboo pieces we wanted to line up to each other. It would pick the dead center of the space and line them up that way. If we said align them to a key object and we made this one the key object, it would align them to that one piece. The third thing you can do is align to the artboard. So if we said align this vertical center, it's going to put it dead center of whatever your artboard is. So there's 3 different ways of having Illustrator line something up for you and do all the math and figure it out where you're not trying. Okay, so aligning objects to each other, make sure that bamboo is selected. So that's all of those pieces that we did before. And why do I need to do that? Make sure that we're on the correct artboard, which is artboard 2, and I actually am not. So make sure that you're on artboard 2 down here, pieces, and that the bamboo is selected. And let's go to our properties panel. So in our properties panel, about halfway down, we see align, and we see a bunch of different options here. Fortunately, if you hover over them, it tells you what they are. And the one that we want to choose is horizontal align center, which is that second option that's lit up. And when we click on that, it's going to line them up based on the center of all of them, and it's going to not change any of the spacing. Do you see how the gaps between them, top to bottom, didn't change? That's fine. It's just horizontally aligning them. Or all of the selected objects move to the horizontal center. We're going to undo this step so we can practice another one. So Command Z, undo, gets you back to all of them staggered where they were. Now we're going to align them to a key object. So we're going to pick one of these bamboo pieces to be the important one, and the rest are going to align to it. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to, right now, notice all of them are selected, correct? You have a bounding box around all of them. So we've initially selected all 6, 7, 8 pieces. Now we're going to say which one is most important. We're going to click on the one that's the leftmost, which is this one. Notice how it has a much thicker blue line around it. That made it the key object, the one that's important. And now we're going to go over to the align menu over here on the right, and we're going to do that same thing. We're going to do horizontal align center, and it's going to do the same thing, but it's going to do it relative to the one that we picked, the key object. So it lined them all up, but in line with that one. Okay, so to do that, you select them all first, and then you click on the important one, the key object, and then you tell it how to behave, and it will do it for you. Okay. All right, click on your key object again. That's going to remove that outline. And we're going to leave all of these pieces selected still. So we still have a big bounding box around all of it. So that's aligning, 2 ways of doing it so far. What about distributing though? Right now we see we have tiny gaps. Up here we have bigger gaps. Do we want to manually space them out, figure out, 0.25 has to go between all of them because of math and all that? Yuck, right? We'd much rather let Illustrator do this work. So we're going to use the distributing objects commands to get that to work. So with those green shapes all selected, we're going to go over here to our panel on the right where we have seen align, all of those options. But we're going to go to the more options, which is the 3 dots right below all those alignment options. And we're going to click on that, and that's going to open a window that has more choices. So our align objects are all there, but we also now see distribute them, what number to use when we distribute them, and how to align them specifically. So this is much more details now. Once we've clicked this More option, we're going to go down to the second row where it's Distribute the Objects, and we're going to choose Vertical Distribute Center, which is the second one. So what happened? Does that look different? So what it did was it took the center of each object and distributed them equally throughout that whole space that it had to work with. So the spacing between the center of each of them is equal. Pretty cool, right? Because doing that on your own would have been a pain. Undo that step, Command Z, get it back to where it was. Come on. All right, why is it not behaving for me? Because everything's grayed out. Undo align. Okay, so if you undo it, you're back to where you have those different spacings between it. All right, with all of the shapes still selected, we have the bounding box around all of them. We're going to click on this topmost object to make it the key object. So we're going to put that dark outline around it, say that that's the most important one. We're going to go back to align and click on the More 3 dots. And in the Distribute here, we're making sure we have to do 2 things first. In the value where it says Distribute Spacing, we're going to change it to 0, and that's going to say no spaces between, and then we're going to tell it how to do it. So make sure it says 0 right here, and then we're going to choose Vertical Distribute, which is, oh, of the 2 right next to it. We're not going up to that second row, we're staying down on this bottom row, and we only have 2 options, vertical or horizontal. At 0, we're going to do vertical. Notice how it pulled them all together, no spacing between them. And what does it look like we built now? Some bamboo. So this one distributes the spacing between selected objects and it centers them. So it pulls them all together with no gaps because we specifically said 0, no spacing there. Click away to deselect it. Might need to do it twice. And then do a file save or a Command S to save it at this point. Okay, did you get where you...
No, it's not aligned.
Okay. I'll help you with that after because we're done with that part of it. Okay. All right, the next section, I'm on page 73 in the book, is aligning anchor points. So far we've been using that black arrow to select whole entire shapes and align whole entire shapes. Now we're going to use our direct selection tool, the white arrow. We're just going to pick 2 anchor points and tell them to do things based on each other. So anchor points only. All right. We're going to use our direct selection tool, which is the white triangle arrow, and we're going to select this orange shape. And what it really did was select all 4 of the potential anchor points. They're filled in with blue now, meaning all 4 of them are selected. All right. We're going to instead go down and select this lower right anchor point specifically. And when we do that, it's now filled in. The other 3 anchor points are not filled in. They're white instead of being filled in blue. And what we're going to do now is we're going to hold down the Shift key and we're going to click to select the lower left point. So hold Shift, click on the lower left point. So now we picked the right one, and then we also added the left point into our selection. The last one you click on becomes your key anchor point, like we were doing before, clicking the object and getting the dark blue around it. Whatever one you click last is the one that's the important one that's going to base everything off of. It's like your anchor point or your key point. So with these 2 selected, we're going to go over to our alignment over here again in our panel. Vertical align top is the one that we want to use. It's the 4th icon that's lit up. Click on that. And the first anchor point that we picked is going to align to the second one, the last one that we selected. So instead of dragging or pulling that down, we know it's exactly on the same line and working. Okay? So we made that shape differently. Click somewhere away to deselect. And we're going to go back to learn the third way of aligning. So I told you can align to all the objects, you can align to one key object, or you can align to the artboard, and that's the one we're going to look at now. So aligning to the artboard, with our normal selection tool, I call it, the black selection tool, we're going to select that orange object to select it as a shape, not as anchor points. So we're going to select that shape, get the whole bounding box around it. And we're going to do some editing. Now there's lots of ways of doing this. I'm going to tell you what we're doing up front so it doesn't seem bizarre. We're basically taking this shape, we're moving it to artboard 1. It's the bottom body of this box, right? So we could click and drag. There's lots of things we can do, but what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off of this page and we're going to paste it on the other one. That's how we're going to practice this method, but there's lots of ways of doing it. All right, so with this selected, we're going to do Edit, Cut, which is just like it is in lots of programs, Command X, maybe in Word or whatever. So we're going to cut it. It's gone, but it's like in virtual memory right now. It's not gone forever. We're going to intentionally move to our other artboard. So at the bottom, either arrow over to artboard 1 or select artboard 1, because artboard 1 has to be the active one when we paste now. So from here, we're going to do an Edit Paste, which is Command V, and it's going to paste it dead center in the artboard. That's just where it comes in. So could we move it by hand, dragging it? Absolutely we could. But what if we want to specifically align it somewhere on the artboard? That's what we're going to do next. We don't see the Align panel over here right now because we're doing something different, so we have to go get it. So we need to do Window, Align, to get that floating panel to show up again. Here it is. I'm going to drag it over here so I see it where I expect it, but it's a floating panel. And in the Align panel, we're going to do a couple of things. The first thing we have to do is at the top of this Align panel on the right, you see the 3 lines, the hamburger menu or show more options. Click on that. If it says hide options, you're already where you need to be. If it says show options, no, let me take that back. This is where we need it to be. But sometimes if you don't see everything that you want, if the options aren't all showing here, go to this hamburger menu and just say show me them. We're already showing them. It's a done deal. So we're good to go. All right, back in this Align menu, first thing we have to do is at the bottom right of it, it says Align to, and then there's an icon and a drop-down box. We're going to click on that drop-down box, and Align to the selection is what's the default. But what we really want to do is align it to the artboard. So we're going to change it to be that option, Align to artboard. Now, whatever we tell it to do in these other rows is going to be based on our artboard, not anything else. We only have one piece selected, so we can't align it to another piece or a key object because it's the only one. So we have to go with the artboard on this one, and it's what we want to do. So Align to artboard, and then we're going to choose Horizontal Align Right as our first option, which is the 3rd icon in that top row. And then we're going to choose Vertical Align Bottom, last button in the top row. That put it exactly on the artboard where we wanted it, based on those 2 decisions. Click away to deselect it. And does anybody see an issue with the stacking order? So as you build these shapes, they go in order. So the first thing you build is at the bottom, and then the next object you draw is on top, on top, on top. So this was drawn later, but it's really meant to be on the bottom. So there's 1,000,001 ways that we get it down where it needs to go, and we'll handle that in a minute. But basically the stacking order is off. That's why it looks funny. Okay, I just want to let you know this is not normal that I lecture for 4 hours. I'm getting winded. We're almost done. There's 3 pages. Good news is this won't ever happen again, and you'll have no homework. So is that a deal? When you leave here, you're done? If you just survive for a few more minutes with me? Okay, good. All right. Grouping things together, working with groups. Remember that first file we saw where we clicked on one leaf of the flower and the whole flower lit up? That's because they had grouped it together. And they did that because when they move the flower, they want the whole flower to go, not just one leaf. So grouping is really common and important. So let's do a fit all in window, Command Option 0. We're going to go up to our select menu and we're going to choose bamboo, that special thing that we made before. That's going to select all of our bamboo over here for us. Basically, it selected them as a group, but they're not actually grouped yet. They're only doing this because we made that save selection. We want to put them into a group for real. I got to move. If you have this floating window, it might be blocking stuff in your panels. So I'm actually going to close this align window by using the X here, or you can just move it out of the way. With our bamboo pieces selected, if we look at our properties panel, some quick actions that it expects you might want to do are always at the bottom here. The group button is one of them. Go ahead and click it. Nothing looks different, but it treats us now as a group. When we grab one and pull, the whole thing is going to go from now on. So deselect it, click away, come back with your selection tool and try to click on just the top piece. It's not going to happen anymore. It's going to select the whole group, and that's fine. We can ungroup them at any time that we want to. It's not a permanent behavior, but we've just grouped those together. Now that we did that, we're going to click with our mouse, hold down, don't let go, drag it over to the other artboard and then let go. So drag it over to this left side and then let go. We've moved it from one artboard to another. Now I do need to use the align tools. That's ironic that I just closed them. So if you also close your align tools, go back up to the window, choose align, and get that panel back in action so we can use it. I'll put it right here. With the bamboo still selected over here, we're going to make sure that we're aligning to our artboard. So from this drop down, make sure that we are aligned to artboard, which in this case mine still was. And we're going to choose vertical align tops. That is the fourth icon in the first row. That's going to take it and vertically align it to the top of our artboard. Guaranteed. If we do it by hand and click and drag, we may be a tiny fraction off or not. This is a for sure deal. All right, with our selection tool, what we're going to do now is we're going to press and hold the Shift key while we drag on one of these bounding boxes. And what we're going to do is we're going to proportionately make the bamboo bigger. So instead of making it longer but staying that same skinniness, we're going to say proportionately we want you to change. So as I draw and make you longer, you're probably going to have to get wider to keep your proportions. Holding the Shift key is what makes that possible. Okay? So we're going to drag the lower right bounding box of our bamboo. We're going to hold Shift and we're going to drag down all the way to the bottom of our artboard. And we're going to make that bamboo longer and thicker proportionately to fill that space. Okay? Yep.
When I put vertical align top, why isn't it just
Maybe you don't have it set up to go to the artboard, so click that. To the artboard, yep. And then this one. Oh,
yeah.
oh. Weird things like this happen. Okay, this isn't grouped yet, so let's do select bamboo, and then let's make it a group. So now it acts as one. So now I think in align. There we go.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep, you just didn't have it grouped, so it was only making that one piece behave.
Okay.
All right, so by holding Shift, we change it proportionately, so you can see how we did that. All right, click away to deselect it, and we're going to learn about isolation mode. And that's when we make a group, and then we go, oh shoot, I want to fix one piece in that group, but I don't necessarily want to ungroup it. So we just enter isolation mode to make some changes. All right, with our selection tool, the black arrow, we're going to go back to Artboard 2 over here. We don't need to change formally, but we're going to drag a selection over these two pieces over on Artboard 2 to select our two leaves. And we're going to group them so that they act as one thing. So at the bottom of your property panel where it says group, click on the group button. Now they're acting as one item, and if we go to move them, they move as a group. They're not two individual pieces anymore. But what if I wanted to change the color of one of these two leaves? Now they're grouped. How do I go about doing that? To do that, we have to get into what's called isolation mode. So we're going to double click on either one of these leaves, and that's going to put us in isolation mode. Do you notice how everything else dimmed, right? You can't do anything but work with this group right now. Also notice up at the top left, we have a lighter gray bar that showed up, and it says we're on layer 1 and in group 1. This happens when you're in isolation mode to help you know where you are. Click now to select the smaller leaf of the two, and we're going to change the color of this one. So we're going to go into our fill. So over here in properties, the fill, we're going to click on that color. And we're going to fill it with whatever you want to prove that it's changing, like pick a red or something, but then ultimately just pick a different color green. So we're going to change the fill of just that one piece. So for the purpose of editing, when you're in isolation mode, they're temporarily ungrouped. Now to get out of this, we can just double click outside of the shapes, or we can hit the escape button. We're now out of isolation mode, so either hit escape on your keyboard or double click a few times in a blank area to get back to normal. But now you can see it's still a group. I've edited just that one piece in isolation mode, but we're back to being a group. Okay, click on your leaf group that you've tweaked so that it's ready to go for our next step. And from here, hopefully you can see both of your artboards. If not, do fit everything in the window. We're going to drag these leaves from Artboard 2 onto Artboard 1, and we're going to put them on top of this bamboo piece over here. So they're stacked on top, which is where they're going to come in naturally. So drag them and then release your mouse. So right now we have a group of leaves, and we have our whole bamboo pole, which is a bunch of individual pieces grouped together also, right? We have two groups. But theoretically, if we wanted to move this bamboo thing, we would want the leaves to go with it. So we want to group the two groups. That's called a nested group. And that's easy to do. So with our leaves still selected, like we see right here, what are we doing here? Nested group. We're going to hold down Shift, and we're going to click on the bamboo group also. So that selects both of them. Notice that the bounding box is around all of them right now. We're going to go back over to our panel, and we're going to click on the group button down here at the bottom to make a bigger group, a nested group. So now our leaves and bamboo sticks are going to function as one group, but within them, there are two nested groups. Click away to deselect it. And we're going to click on the leaves, and that of course is going to give us our nested group, our big group of leaves and bamboo. But if we wanted to change the leaves again, we'd have to go back into that isolation mode. So we'd have to double click again on the leaves. And again, the first double click just gets us into the first group. The second double click gets us all the way to the leaves. So we're entering isolation mode twice, which you can see up here in this light gray line. We're on layer 1, and we're drilled down one group, and we're drilled down to the second group. So now if we wanted to change the color of that leaf again, by selecting it, we can do that. And then to get out of it, we're either going to hit escape a couple of times, or we're going to double click away. So you can make one group, two groups, group them together. That's called a nested group. All right. Yes.
If you were to ungroup a nested group, would it like just separate back into the groups?
Into the two pieces, yes. Yeah, if you wanted to ungroup them and have your leaves be a group and your whole bamboo be a group, it would just split them into those two big groups. And if you wanted to break it up to where we started, we'd have to ungroup one more time, each of them. Yep. Okay, the last blurb before I lose my voice and you lose your minds. Object arrangement. This whole idea of colored paper stacking. We have a problem with the body of our fox, and we still have two shapes over here hanging out that we have to figure out what we're doing with. All right, with our selection tool, click on the big orange shape that is the body of the fox. And in our properties panel, in our quick actions over here, we also have one that's called arrange. They know that this is pretty typical. Click on the arrange button and it gives us 4 options. Bring to the front means no matter where it is in the stack, you're bringing it all the way to the top. Send to the back means it's going all the way to the back. The other 2 options, forward or backward, go up 1 step at a time, 1 layer at a time, up or down. So this one, where does it need to go?
Back.
Okay, let's see what happens. Send to the back. That's our first step. And it was a good one, and it was the right one, but what happened? There's that blue shape is truly there too. So now we just need to step forward 1 step, right? So we click on arrange again, and we just say bring forward. So sometimes you don't know where they are in the stacking order, and you just play around with this. Other times you very obviously can go to your layers panel itself and see where they're stacked. But that's a good, easy way to see the arranging. So we now have that where we need it. All right, when we do this stacking, sometimes it's hard to see where the pieces are. They might get hidden. Like that one, had we, let me just undo. Look if I'm not selected. Now I'm like, I don't even know there's a piece there, right? It's like, it's gone. I don't have the selection box around it. So sometimes it gets hard to know what you're doing and where things are, and then you need to use other tools to make it work better. So let me get this fixed. Arrange back, arrange forward. Okay. So selecting objects that are hidden behind other objects. Use your selection tool and marquee drag across these eyeballs over here, both circles. And then we're going to, whoops, I picked the wrong one. Nope. We're going to make these a little bit smaller. And one thing I want you to know is there's tooltips that pop up that give you measurements. But if you're at the same view I am, where you're seeing both artboards, it's going to be really small. Unless you have great eyes, it's going to be hard to read. So I'm actually going to zoom in over here so I can see this a little bit better when I'm doing it. I'm going to hold one of these corners and hold shift, and while I drag, I'm going to make them smaller. But do you see this gray box that's changing and it says width and height? That's telling me, because I haven't let go of my mouse or the shift key, that's telling me what size they are. And specifically in the book, they're saying make them about 1.3 inches wide. So that's shrinking them down quite a bit there, 1.3. There's a million other ways to do this, but this is the way the book walks us through it. So take those, shift, and hold one of the corners and pull it in until you get down to 1.3 inches. Click away from the circles to deselect them. And then we're going to need to see both artboards again. So Command Option 0. Now with your selection, we're going to drag one of these circles over here onto our artboard 1 and make it be a pupil, if you will, on top of the side. What's going on? Why don't I see a light tan thing show up? Any guesses?
Behind it.
Stacking order. It's behind it. Yep. This piece was drawn before the other one, so it automatically went in a stacking order behind. Because we didn't deselect it, we still have the bounding box, we still know it's there, so that's a relief. We can easily do that. So in our Arrange button, we can say bring forward or bring to front, however many times we need to do this. Eventually, that's going to show up, and then you can position it wherever you want it. Whoops, I lost it again. Arrange, bring to front. Okay, so there's one pupil. When your bounding box is still there, it's easy to know it's there and to change the arrangement. Now let's grab this other one, drag it over onto the pupil. Again, we see the bounding box. It's easy to figure this out, but click away and deselect. Now that it's not there, it's a little harder to know something's there. So if you ever do this and you don't know where the object is, there's a couple of ways of doing it. I'm going to zoom in so you can see just this artboard. That's what I wanted to do. And one way to do it is to look at the outlines. Command Y. Look, there it is. We know it exists. So I could select it that way. The other way of doing it is that you take your selection and you hang around in this where you know your shape is, but you just can't find it. And we're going to hold down the command button and just click a few times until eventually we find it and get it, because it is in there. There it is. Eventually I got lucky and clicked in the right zone. And from there we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to tell it to come forward in the arrangements. I think it's a lot easier to just go and grab it in outline mode and tell it to come forward. Bring to the front. All right, arrange, bring to the front. So there it is. If you do a file save, you will have completed lesson 2. Thank you for surviving lecture-a-thon that I did not realize would take this long. I actually